Well, I'm not sure that there is anything very much I can say other than say thank you for the occasion. And I'm really very touched that the occasion had been organized with, and I'm embarrassed about my name being associated, but I can't say that I'm disgusted. So, thank you very much for arranging it. And I couldn't have really thought of a better person to give the first lecture than Tony Atkinson. And as you have just heard, an altogether absolutely brilliant lecture. I mean, I have never heard Tony give anything other than brilliant lectures, but if there's something as a brillianter than most brilliant, this certainly is it. I mean, we always think of superlatives, and there's always a problem in that. One always thinks of that something could be even better. And I remember one occasion when Paul Samuelson told me that he went to give a lecture, and he asked the organizer, saying, well, how long should I speak? Would 15 minutes be optimal? And the organizer said, yes, absolutely, 15 minutes would be optimal, but 10 minutes would be even better. So I think I've heard the most brilliant lecture earlier, but this was brillianter than that. So, Tony, really very, very many thanks indeed. It's really quite difficult, I would have thought, for someone to give a lecture with the guy sitting there in whose name it is. And I made quite sure when I was giving the David Hume lecture and the Adam Smith lecture that they were not around. Because there is a difference, of course, in this case, in the case of David Hume, and if somebody were to come up at the end of my lecture and I said, who are you? And we were to say, I am David Hume. I don't think I would ask any question about what he might be doing there. But, of course, Amartya Sen isn't quite in that category at all, though on one occasion, not far from here, I did have a sense of becoming very famous. This was a seminar in Hanover. There was a conference going on, and I attended that. And I was going home, and I was standing in a traffic light with the pedestrian light saying right, showing red and saying don't walk. And there were no cars in sight at all. After a little while, I decided to cross and go to the other side, and there was a gentleman on the other side, and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Sen, he said, here in Germany you actually wait for the light to change. So I was very flattered that he knew me. So I looked very cheerfully and I said, so how do we know each other? And he said, well, I don't know you, you're wearing your conference badge. But I'm really absolutely delighted that Tony had made me famous by giving this lecture. I'm very, very grateful indeed. I think in terms of the idea of justice, I think of, I mean, there are so many different points that I try to make, some successfully and some not so successfully. But I think the 2 points, both of which came up in Tony's discussion. One is the thing that what I call transcendental, namely being just concerned with optimal, but optimal is a problem with philosophers because sometimes they don't admit that there's such a, that when they think this is right as opposed to just, this is right or just as opposed to unjust or not right, that they mean optimal because that requires already a kind of, what in their judgment would be a kind of comparative scale, which they don't want. It's just, this is right and other things are wrong. So I tend to use transcendental, meaning that, actually I came to, I was amused that Tony mentioned my friend Tom Nagel and me, and actually the idea of justice originally began when he and I gave a seminar in Columbia. I don't think I discussed it in the book. And And I was criticizing him for it. It was actually Joe Stiglitz was chairing it. And I was criticizing him for it. And I used the word, I used the word transcendental, saying, that is your approach, isn't it? That you look at what the ideal thing would be, and at the same time, you're not concerned really on how you compare one situation with another. And we argued about that. And when we were walking to dinner, Tom told me, you know, actually what I disliked most about what you said was the word transcendental. And I told myself, my God, that fixes it. And it's clearly something I could get some mileage out of, in the sense of getting people to respond to it. And I fixed that. It's not a terribly good term, and every now and then people point out that Kant, he didn't use the word transcendental in that sense, and that's absolutely right. But basically it's concerned with the idea that you don't look only at optimum, that would be the economist way of thinking about it, or the correct, or the just, or the right, but you look at how, given two situations, neither of which are optimal, how would you go about dealing with it? And I think there is a real division. Actually, my friend Kotaro Suzumura, who is a great social choice theorist, spent some time, is still there in Trinity over the summer, and we were working out some of the implications of the various work, mostly his work that he had done, because he is being much more productive than I am. But we also discussed this, and he said that in some ways he suggested that there is a kind of classification you can do, can't you? That those theories which not only identify what we would call optimum, but also gives you a way of ranking. Well, a very good example would be the Atkinson index of inequality. It may give you what would be perfect inequality, but it's not even primarily concerned with that, but though it could be used for that purpose. But it generates a ranking. But there's a lot of other things that doesn't. And you know, when I'm hoping, not the coming academic year, but next year after that, to teach a course with my old friend Eric Maskin, and when we teach a course on social choice theory, it would be interesting, because if you think about implementation theory, it's all about whether it's implementable or not. But there's no such concept as more implementable, less implementable, and so on. And there's a whole lot of theories which concentrate only on the ideal, and that does not have a natural translation in terms of ranking. And I would tend to think, if I'm trying to, under Kotaro Suzumura's guidance, think about the implications of what I'm trying to say, it would be that there is a lot to be said for working for theories which naturally generates a ranking, even if it were the case that you're actually looking for the ideal. And there are a lot of situations in which we are looking for the ideal. In general, it should not be a theory of that kind. And you see, one of the mathematical points of I think, considerable importance is that the identification of the ideal doesn't help you to rank at all, in the sense that you can't, the natural thought that people comes in your mind, that's the kind of standard common sense thought, which I'm afraid is mistaken, is that by looking at how far are you from the optimal, you'll get some idea. But that's absolutely no way of handling it, because you could be very close from the optimal in one part, but you can't take the next step at all. Or in another part, maybe some distance, but you can easily do it. Or to put it another way, if you're looking at inoptimality because of liberty being violated, or inequality being great, or some other thing, there's an enormous issue about how easy they would be respectively removable, and also how much trade-off you would like to attach to it when you're judging the failures. I mean, suppose you can't get there to the optimal, so it's not, you're not even asking how far it is, but you're just asking, if you were to live in this situation, how intolerable is it compared with another? So I think that's the kind of direction in which to go, and of course as I indicated, that of course Tony Atkinson's work has always been in a way that intrinsically generates a ranking. And I think that I'm often told that I'm too critical of economics, but in this case I celebrate economics because we have always worked in that direction. That would apply to all the people that Tony was mentioning, including Edgeworth and Pigou, because their work has been in that direction.